copyright law help or hinder democratic discourse in the metaverse? Let's find out. Today we are joined by Dr. Sunimal Mendis, Assistant Professor at Tilburg University, and she specializes in copyright law, and I'm going to be taking her interview. I'm Shania Rohela, also working at Tilburg University as a postdoctoral researcher in financial regulation. So let's dive in. Hello Suni, how are you today?
Hi Shania, I'm good.
So let's dive straight into the topic.
Sure.
Can you tell me the relationship between copyright and democratic discourse?
Indeed, that's a great question. So these days copyright has rather a bad rap, doesn't it? Many people see it as this evil law regime that restricts their ability to access, enjoy and engage with creative and cultural content, and thereby restricts their freedom of expression. And the reason for this is that traditionally lawmakers all over the world have put a lot of emphasis on strengthening and protecting the copyrights of the copyright owners. So the authors who create the content, and also the corporate entities like the record producers, the movie producers who invest in that. But this strengthening of the rights of the copyright owners have also come at the cost of the users' freedoms to engage with this content. But when we really look closely at the relationship between copyright and democratic discourse and the freedom of expression, we see that it is a lot more complex and sophisticated. It is not just about protecting the creators and the people who invest in the creation. It is also about ensuring that the public can actually have legitimate access to this content. For example, democratic theories of copyright law, such as the communicational theory, which is also known as the social planning theory, this holds that copyright's overarching purpose is, in fact, to foster robust democratic discourse by providing to members of the public a rich and diverse body of creative and cultural content, which they can use in socially valuable ways.
Fascinating, Suni. So do you mean to say that communicational theory has flipped the script? It has made copyright and democratic discourse friends, pals even, and not mere enemies?
Absolutely.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more of how copyright law can foster democratic discourses, specifically in digital public spheres?
Of course, it's all about striking the right balance between the rights and interests of the copyright owners and the rights and interests of the public. So it's very important that we ensure that the legitimate rights and interests of the copyright owners are adequately protected, because otherwise it might mean that they stop producing content and that members of the public will have less fun, cool content to enjoy. On the other hand, we must also ensure that the public's legitimate rights and interests in accessing and enjoying this content, but also in reinterpreting, modifying, and building upon this content in ways that contribute to robust democratic discourse are preserved and fostered.
Okay, I do have a follow-up for you out there. Can you give me some examples of these, reinterpretations, modifications of copyright-protected material, and how can they foster democratic discourse?
Absolutely. So I think a very good example would be the creation of parodies. For instance, think of all the parodies of the Marlboro cigarette advertisements. These are, they are very funny, but their object is not just to be funny. They also challenge and critique the message of coolness, masculinity and freedom that the Marlboro advertisements try to convey, and also highlight how this product can actually be very harmful to human health. So there are many other ways in which existing copyright-protected content can be reinterpreted and modified in order to challenge and critique dominant political, social, economic, and cultural narratives. For instance, think of the GIFs and the memes that people create out of existing content, which is then posted on social media in very strategic ways that stimulate public discussion. So we call these transformative users of copyright protected content, right? Because they change the content in order to achieve a different objective. And such transformative users are a very powerful form of self-expression. And as I said before, they also stimulate democratic discourse and deliberation on matters of common interest. And therefore, it is very important that these are protected and fostered on the digital public sphere and the metaverse.
Okay, now I have a biggie for you. How do we actually balance the interests and rights of copyright owners, people who've actually invested so much on their original work, vis-a-vis the rights and interests of general public in real life? Is there like a magical seesaw that we can employ?
I think a magical seesaw that can strike that perfect balance would be really cool. Unfortunately, we don't have one yet. And how we do this at the moment is through what we call internal and external balancing mechanisms. So let me just explain. Internal balancing mechanisms refer to mechanisms that are inbuilt into the copyright law system itself. A good example would be exceptions to copyright. I think many people are familiar with the fair use doctrine in the US, which allows users to use copyright protected content without having to seek a copyright owner's permission in specific ways and for specific purposes. Now, in the EU, we don't have such a broad and open doctrine such as fair use, but we do have specific exceptions that, for instance, permit the use of portions of copyright protected works or quotations for the purposes of criticism and review, and also permit the use of copyright protected works either in their entirety or in portions for the creation of parodies, pastiche, caricature, etc. So those are examples of internal balancing mechanism. We also have external balancing mechanisms, and a good example of that is the fundamental right to freedom of expression. Now, there is also a fundamental right to copyright, which is grounded in the fundamental right to property. And sometimes when the freedom of expression and the rights and interests of copyright owners are pitted against each other, you can use these two fundamental rights to balance one against the other in a way that adequately safeguards everyone's freedoms and fundamental rights. It is interesting that the Court of Justice of the European Union, in a series of decisions, has also recognized that it is very important that the courts interpret copyright exceptions, those are the internal balancing mechanisms, in a way that will also safeguard the freedom of expression of users. So to come back to your question, there is unfortunately no magical seesaw. However, how we are trying to achieve this balance by ensuring that lawmakers who make the copyright laws make them and frame them in a way that can strike a fair balance, and also that the courts who interpret and apply these laws do so in a way that can achieve a fair balance.
Okay, Suni, now tell me, how does this balancing act play out in digital public spheres? You know, something like what comes to my mind right now is the Metaverse. How does it happen in the Metaverse, for example?
Indeed. So in the Metaverse, achieving this fair balance becomes rather challenging. And the main reason for this is the good old public-private divide that we discussed in a previous video. So let me just illustrate this with reference to the dispute surrounding the Raging Bull statue in New York.
Oh, the famous bull statue near the Wall Street. You know, if you're supposed to scratch certain parts of the statue, it's supposed to bring you good luck.
Interesting, see? You learn something new every day. Well, anyway, in 1987, the artist who created the statue of the Raging Bull or the Fearless Bull intended it to serve as a symbol of strength and optimism in financial markets, so a very positive connotation. Then in 2017, another artist created the statue of the Fearless Girl, which you may also have seen if you visited New York, and placed it right in front of the Raging Bull on International Women's Day. Now, the Fearless Girl statue depicts a young girl with her hands on her hips in a defiant pose, staring down the Raging Bull. And it was meant to be a critique of male domination in the financial industry, and also to highlight the importance of female empowerment in that industry.
Oh, wow. So essentially, putting the statue there transformed the place from a symbol of strength and resilience to a symbol of mere male domination.
Absolutely. And the artist who created the Raging Bull statue didn't like this at all. So he complained that by placing the Fearless Girl in front of his statue and by forcing an artistic interaction between the two statues, the Fearless Girl statue actually subverted the original artistic message that he wished to convey via the Raging Bull statue. And he claimed that this infringed upon his moral right to artistic integrity. Now, the moral right to artistic integrity is a right granted under copyright law in certain jurisdictions that allow creators of content to object to distortions of that content without their permission. It is very uncertain whether this particular artist could have actually claimed an infringement of his moral right to artistic integrity under US law, because US law doesn't grant such a broad moral right to artistic integrity. But still, that is not what we are talking about. What is interesting is this balance, again, between the interest of the copyright owner and the freedom of expression of another artist.
Okay, Suni, just so that I am clear, in this particular case, the right to artistic integrity, the moral right that an artist has towards his product, is pitted against, let's say, the right to social commentary, the right to provide criticism.
Absolutely. Indeed, and this particular dispute, it sparked a vibrant public debate with many members of the public, even the mayor of New York at the time, Bill de Blasio, weighing in to express their own opinions about the artistic messages conveyed by the two statues and the legitimacy of their forced interaction. So this is a very good example of how reinterpreting and engaging with copyright-protected content in artistic and creative ways can actually contribute to a robust democratic discourse. So I won't go into the legal nitty-gritties of this particular dispute because they are very complex. But what I wanted to highlight by using this illustration is that because this dispute took place in the real world, in New York, the determination of the dispute would have, in the first instance, been carried out by the New York City Council, which is a public body, and if any party was not satisfied with that decision, the final decision and the adjudication of the dispute would have been with the courts. And in both cases, we can expect that the determination of the dispute would have been carried out in a manner that would achieve a fair balance between the competing rights and interests involved, because the New York City Council as a public body would also pay attention to achieving a fair balance between fundamental rights, and also it is expected that they will have the public interest in fostering democratic discourse in their minds when determining the dispute. The court, of course, would be bound to ensure that a fair balance between the fundamental right to copyright and freedom of expression is achieved.
Okay, fascinating, Suni. Let's do a thought experiment here, okay? Let's take this drama and put it in the virtual world. Extrapolate it completely to the virtual digital public setting.
Right.
How does the drama unfold? Tell me.
So that is where it really gets interesting. So because these virtual worlds and digital platforms are subject to private ownership, there is no public body like the New York City Council that is able to intervene and determine the dispute. Also, because of the transnational character of these virtual spaces and platforms, even if a court of law were to determine the dispute in a way that balances the fundamental rights, it would be quite challenging to ensure that it is properly enforced in the virtual setting. So in a virtual world, there's a high likelihood that these types of disputes would be determined via internal governance mechanisms. And virtual worlds can adopt different governance models. So for instance, some virtual worlds like Meta Horizon worlds, Roblox, they adopt centralized governance models. This means that it is the platform owner who has the power and discretion to determine such disputes via their terms of service and their content moderation mechanisms. On the other hand, virtual worlds like Decentraland, they adopt more decentralized governance models. So here, it is possible that such a dispute would actually be determined by the members of the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, or the DAO. Now, the DAO is comprised of users of the virtual world based on the amount of virtual assets, NFTs, crypto land, that they own. So it's quite a plutocratic model of governance. So in either case, whether it is the platform owner who has the power and discretion, or whether it is the DAO, it is doubtful whether they would be interested or even able to determine such a dispute in a way that can strike the fair balance. For example, imagine that the platform owner feels that placing the fearless girl in front of the raging bull is harmful to its brand. Then would that incentivize the platform owner to remove the fearless girl, even though doing so might undermine the freedom of expression of the other artist and the public? Also, the same problem can arise as regards the DAO. Imagine that the members of the DAO don't agree with the artistic message conveyed by the fearless girl and its critique of the message of strength and optimism in the financial markets that the raging bull is meant to convey. Perhaps then they would decide to also remove the fearless girl. So this is why, given the opportunities provided by the metaverse for many different types of communication and the ability of these different types of communications to foster very robust democratic discourse, it is very important that we ensure that these spaces are governed in a manner that the individual preferences or agendas of private parties are not able to have the final say in resolving disputes concerning copyright and the freedom of expression.
Very insightful, Suni. This has surely given me so much food for thought. It's going to take quite a while to digest. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Shania. I had so much fun with this interview, and I'm really glad that I have given you food for thought, because that is the whole objective of this video, that we get people thinking about these things, because public opinion can be very powerful, and it is what drives the lawmaking process.
All right. So that was Sunimal Mendis talking about copyright and democratic discourses.